I am Mark Hogue, chair of the Beverly Hills Bar Association's AI in the Law section, along with my co-chair, Amanda Harris. And I'm also the founder of Axiomic LLC, an AI first web and iOS app development company. And for my day job, though, I do still run HogueLaw.ai, where I serve as fractional GC to primarily AI first, okay, I guess that's everybody, SaaS companies and tech startups. Yet another amazing intro for our speaker today, Stephen Smith. Stephen is the CEO of Intelligence by Intent, where he provides AI strategy advisory and training to law firms and professional services organizations. He has delivered AI training and strategic guidance to over 1,000 organizations with a focus on practical adoption, governance, and measurable ROI rather than just theoretical overviews. Stephen brings over 25 years of executive leadership experience, including CFO and SVP RevOps roles at multiple organizations and strategy partner roles at IBM Global Services and TCG Advisors, developing growth strategies for Fortune 100 technology companies. Stephen holds an MBA from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania and writes the Intelligence by Intent newsletter at smithstephen.com. That's Smith, Stephen. So thanks everybody for being here today. Stephen, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. I'm excited to be back and excited that everyone is here on at least what is a warm day in Los Angeles. So let me get the screen up here, move a couple things out of the way. And I assume you guys can see the slides okay? All right. Well, I will assume the answer is yes. Well, look, thank you for having me back. There has been a ton of updates since I last talked about AI with the Beverly Hills Bar Association. There are new models, there are new capabilities, there are new ways of doing work. So we're going to cover a lot of those different things today. But I always like to start with this slide. And I ask people when I do keynotes and things, when is the last time that you spent 3 hours on something that AI can do in 3 minutes? And I hope what you'll see over the course of the next hour is just how much these tools can do now. As I said, it has changed an incredible amount, and I'm excited to show you some of the things that are new. So over the next 50 minutes, we're going to talk about a couple of things. The first thing is what I call the shift, right? And so in the early days of using AI tools, it was really more like a chatbot. Ask a question, get an answer, drop in a paragraph, get some changes. We have really moved now into the work phase where these tools can do real work for you, and you'll see a bunch of examples of that over the course of the day. Then we'll talk about what's new in Claude. Mark and I were talking beforehand about the changes, the Opus 5 model, and we'll talk about some other things here. And then we'll turn our attention to ChatGPT and what they're doing with ChatGPT work and Codex. I was really hoping for more announcements on Gemini. They were supposed to release their new model. They haven't done that yet. So I will talk about a couple of things there. And then I'll talk about some of the things that you can do to drive AI adoption going forward. So I want to start with this point because this is one of the most important things. And if you see any of my writing, if you see me give a keynote, I talk about this a lot. And the big shift that I'm seeing and others are seeing now with Anthropic, who does Claude, and OpenAI that does ChatGPT, and even Gemini with Google with Gemini, is they're no longer selling answers, they're selling work, right? So all three vendors are now shipping the same layers, frontier models, firm knowledge, connections, playbooks, agents. Both ChatGPT and Claude have office connections. Things can run in the background, they can run in the cloud. They are really changing what the expectation is for what we're doing here. And the way I describe it is I talk about the 5 modes of AI work. And in the early days, if you were using ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we were really more of a replacement for Google, right? It was ask a question, get an answer, tell me about this law, does this memo make sense? How can I make this argument a little bit stronger, things like that. And it really was an ask and answer, and it truly was a replacement for Google. Then the phase 2 was really the drafting phase where it was, hey, I'm working on this Word document. I want you to help me improve it. Can you look at these arguments? Did I miss anything? Or I've uploaded a transcript. Can you give me a draft of what was said? Things like that. And the vast majority of the work is still happening there, to be perfectly honest. And that's how most people use the tools day to day. But where everybody's focus now is called co-work. And in the early days, Claude was the first one. They launched something in the Claude desktop app, and I'll show it to you shortly, called Claude Co-work. And just recently in July, ChatGPT launched something called ChatGPT Work. And really what it is, it's a way for these tools to start working on files on your computer to, to be able to process hundreds or thousands of files, to create presentations, to create Word docs, to drive track changes, and to do all sorts of things for you. And again, you'll see some good examples. Where I see things going next, and I'm not going to focus on this today, but more around delegation. So I've actually got an entire set of agents that run my business for me, and I basically sort of manage those agents. And in the future, we'll see organizations that actually orchestrate, fleets of agents doing things for the business. But what I want to talk about today is really where we are in this co-work phase. And as I said, both companies have taken a very similar approach. So if you have been in the Claude desktop app anytime soon, right, what you've noticed now, in the home button on the upper left, and I'm using a Mac version, right, there's the home and there's code. But in home, if you now look in the chat window here, you'll see it says chat, which is your regular chat. I could type something, I could type hi in here and I could go get a response to it. And the real power now is in co-work. And what you'll see here in co-work and in some of the demos is you can actually point it at a directory. You can give it access to different things. You can have it, give it autonomous, rule following to go do and only ask for certain permissions. It is really, really interesting. And I'll show you why this is so powerful now and what you can do with it. And if you go into the ChatGPT app, they've effectively done the same thing. So on the very top up here on the left, it says ChatGPT or Codex, just like in Claude, it says, chat or, Claude code. But when you're in ChatGPT here, what you'll notice on the top of the screen up here, let me move this down a little bit so I can see it, is you have regular chat and now you have work. And work has the same thing. You can pick a project, you can add a directory, you can access plugins. So they are really shifting what they expect you to do with these tools. And as I said, they're moving away from simple chat now into how do I actively use these tools to go drive things? So again, I'll show you some examples as we go through this today. So one of the questions I get often is how do you know when do you use chat or when do you use co-work, right? And I try to simplify and I try to make it really simple. When you're asking a question, when you just want to drop something in, you want to get an answer, you want to verify it yourself, right? And maybe you want to paste the output into another document, use chat, right? Use it the way you've been using it. When you want it to do work, when you want it to create a file for you, when you want it to work on a folder or take action for you, on its own, then you want to use co-work, right? You can define the deliverables, you can identify different sources, you can create agents that run in the background, even when your laptop is closed now, so things can actually run in the cloud. And you can actually ask for various levels of approval where you can actually say, hey, I want you just to go do everything, just tell me when you're done, or step by step, I want you to show me what's different. I want you to show me what's new. And I want to figure out, how we make this work going forward so you can get permissions. And for a lot of folks, obviously getting permission is very, very important, right? We don't want these things to go off and do things on their own. We often want to say, hey, here's what we can do, go this far, then ask me before you continue. One of the things I want to highlight is how smart these models have gotten. And whenever one of these companies releases a new model, so, Opus 5 just released last week, there are a ton of benchmarks that get out there. The one that I really like the best is from this organization called the Artificial Analysis. And they publish something called the Artificial Analysis Intelligence Index. And what this index is, it's a conglomeration of the hardest problems, the hardest coding problems, the hardest reasoning problems, in PhD level problems across, the different sciences and mathematics and things like that. And so to give you a sense of where we were, a year ago, the best model out a year ago in August of 2025 was, Claude 4.1 Opus. And Claude had the highest benchmark at that time, and it could basically, answer about 1/3 of those very, very challenging and very, difficult questions. You can see over the course of this year, right? By February, we had jumped up to, a score of 44, and this is a score out of 100. It doesn't mean exactly that, 100 or 44% of the problems can be solved, but it's a close enough proxy. So when you think about it, you can see how smart these models are getting. Right? By April, we were in the 50s. By May, we were in the, the mid to high 50s. And by July, with the release of, again, Claude Opus 5 running on the max thinking, we're now basically approaching 2/3 of the most challenging questions out there can be handled by these AI tools, right? They have gotten incredibly smart. In fact, if you saw the announcement, the upcoming ChatGPT 6, I believe the code name is Astra for it, which should get released sometime in the next few weeks. just solved 10 absolutely incredibly difficult math problems that had not been solved throughout history. So these tools are getting better and better. They're getting smarter and smarter. But what really matters for you and what matters for me is this different benchmark. So from the same organization, there's a benchmark called GDP Val. And what they did is you can see over here, I put the description in, right? This is a benchmark designed to evaluate the AI models on real world, economically valuable tasks across 44 occupations, right? So there's 1,300 tasks derived from 9 major industries, right? Things that actually contribute to GDP. And again, this is the state of the art today. And the average human, by the way, when they benchmark this, has a score of 1,000, right? So that's the starting point. And it's an ELO score. The best model right now, again, is Claude Opus 5 on Max, which has a score of 1,861. And that doesn't mean it's, 1.86 times better than a human or anything like that. The way the ELO scoring works is effectively if you gave, all 1,300 of these tasks to, people to review, if they had a human do the task and the AI do the task, effectively with the score, 99.3% of the time, people are going to want to see the AI output. They're going to rate it more highly than the human output, right? So the ability of these tools to create presentations, to create Word docs, to do analysis, to do spreadsheets has gotten absolutely astonishing. And this has been my benchmark. And I have found this to be absolutely true. These tools create amazing things. So let's jump in and let's talk about an example here because I like to make this live. And again, if there are questions, please ask questions real time. I'm happy to answer them. I know Suzanne can interrupt me if there's something pressing, but I'd love to make this as interactive as possible. But one of the things that these tools have gotten great at now are scheduled tasks, right? And so both Claude Cowork has it, ChatGPT Work has it. And in the early days, when Claude Cowork came out earlier this year, I think it was originally released in February, you could do a scheduled task, but your laptop or your computer had to be open. It had to be on in order for it to run. Now, most of these tasks actually run in the cloud, which is a great change. And so one of the things we can do is we can say, hey, something like every morning at 5 a.m., I want you to connect to my email and my calendar, check my most recent 24 hours of emails, identify the ones I haven't responded to, and also look at my calendar to identify the meetings that I've scheduled for the day and any remaining work days in the week. So give me sort of a forward view, provide a detailed summary and recommended responses to anything I need to do in order to prepare for my day. And the way you structure these is, by the way, I have a document here, all these prompts. So all the prompts that you see today, they weren't part of the download, but at the end on the last slide of the deck is my email. If you'd like copies of these prompts, and this is the simplest one, they get far more detailed, shoot me an email. I'm happy to share these. I share these after every event because I'm a huge believer in sharing the learning and making people better with these tools. So this is the prompt. I'm going to go ahead and copy it here. And I'm just going to go say copy and paste. And the way you would do this, I'm going to go into Codex for a second here. And I'm just going to start a new chat. And actually, we'll make it a chat here. And I'm just going to paste this in. And I'm going to say every morning at 5 a.m., I want you to do these things, right? And I'm going to go ahead and say go. And it's literally going to interpret these instructions. It's going to figure out what it has to do. And it's going to actually take it. We won't wait for it to finish, but it will put it over here then in the scheduled tasks, right? So I have, in this case, I created an anonymized one to show at the event here, but I'm going to show you the one that's in Claude as well. But all you have to do in order to create a task is, a prompt like that. It will then create this for you, right? Prepare Steve's daily email and calendar briefing, use the connected Gmail account. And if you happen to have, if you're connected to Outlook, it connects to your Outlook, it reads your calendars now. I asked it for this example to anonymize the data, but the one I have in Claude did the same thing. And this goes through and it runs every day. Here's the daily brief. You can actually do different things. And if I go actually over into Claude, I actually had it created over here. I think this is the version. Let me just click on this here. Yeah, here is what my morning brief looks like, right? So again, I had it anonymize the data, but it went through every morning and it says, hey, let's talk about what your day looks like, right? I had a meeting, from 7 to 9:30. I've got some different things on here. It was empty from 9:30 to 12:15. From 12:15 onward, I've got the prep for the CLE event. And then, so again, I disguised the data, but then here it says, hey, here's all the emails that need attention. So these aren't real, but they actually are, but I just changed the names on them. But you can see, Dan Whitfield wants some time today, someone else about Whisper and cost, right? There's some things about rules, some things that have been resolved, things like that, and then some draft responses because that's what I asked it to do. So the great part about it is when you have these scheduled tasks, if I go back into here and go look at the scheduled tasks, right? Here's my morning brief. I literally had typed that exact same prompt in here. And because it now runs in the cloud, you can see the little cloud icon here. I don't actually have to have my computer open. And you'll see here, here's one I created a while ago to figure out some weekly Los Angeles and Santa Barbara family events. This one actually has a computer icon. I did this before they made the shift to the cloud. So it actually, my computer has to be open for it to run. But by default now, all of them go run in the cloud. They're great. Any connectors you have, if you're using MCP connectors to your data sources where you have your, your legal stuff, your email, anything you want to do, you can now automate. And there's no limit to the kind of things that you can automate as you go forward here. So let's keep going and let's talk about Claude. So most of you know, if you've seen me present before, I talk about Claude a lot. I do most of my demos in Claude. In fact, if you look behind me right up there, there's a little Claude icon on my bookshelf. I'm a huge fan of, the Claude models. Their reasoning and writing is fantastic. So in the last couple of months, they've done a number of things. So on May 12th, they updated their Claude for Legal, right? So it was a huge industry release. It wasn't just a plugin update. They provided legal connectors to 20 different legal connectors, 12 practice area plugins. They introduced Claude inside Word, Outlook, Excel, PowerPoint, and I'm going to show you an example of that in a minute, right? A huge release for them. They have really focused on legal, and that's why so many of the firms that I work with really focus on Claude and use these tools. Then in June, they launched Fable 5 and then Sonnet 5. And if those of you that use Claude know that they introduced it, then they pulled it back and then it's out again. I will tell you the one hesitancy that I tell all my clients in using Fable, they have different data restrictions on it. So even if you're on the commercial plan, they are still holding that data for a while. So if you are conscious and care about enterprise security, I'm hard pressed to recommend Fable to put legal work in at the moment, but use Sonnet, use Opus, use the other models. All the normal non-training stuff applies. So just be careful with Fable until they come back on that stuff. Then I was very excited about this. They introduced the co-work for servers that I was just talking about. So you can schedule any task that runs in the cloud, anything that you want to do. It can read documents, it can process things, it can read your calendar, it can go out, it can do internet research for you. Anything you want to do, you can actually fire off now agents that can run effectively 24/7. And then on July 23rd and 24th, they launched Opus 5, their biggest flagship model that's not part of Fable. And they introduced new voice capabilities. So you can actually talk to Claude now and have much more interactive sessions than you could before. And I happen to really like the voice model in ChatGPT, which I'll show you an example of in a minute. But the legal stack, as I said, they have really doubled down on legal, right? They built connectors for iManage, NetDocuments, Everlaw, Relativity, Thomson Reuters, DocuSign, more and more. And so I put the link here. This will be part of the presentation. You can go get more about it. It's just part of what they offer. I would encourage you to look at it and look at their practice area plugins, right? They've introduced some really, really great capabilities that help you automatically create skills and do other things. And then my favorite part, honestly, and for most of the attorneys I work with, their favorite part also was the office surfaces. So they introduced Claude plugins into Word, Outlook, Excel, and PowerPoint. And I'm going to show you an example of that next. That is an incredible capability, and it has really changed how people can use these tools. So again, what I tell people is, co-work, because it can run in the cloud, can now work while you're in court, right? So back in February, if you're using co-work, it was sort of Claude code for everybody else like us, but you pointed at a folder, it reads, it edits, it creates, but it ran locally on your machine and your laptop had to be open. Now, with these new models, again, as I said, it runs in the cloud, it runs on Anthropic servers. You can fire them off from web, from mobile. You can schedule tasks from anytime, any place, and the answers land on your phone, anytime something sends. You can see the results right away. So it's a real change of pace from the way it used to work before. So let's talk about Claude in Microsoft Word, because this is a great example. And I'm going to do a quick live example to show you something, and then I'll show you a real world example of how it works. But if I go into Microsoft Word here, what you'll see is over here, I've got a little Claude button up here. So if you are subscribed to Claude, you can download the extension, you can log in. So this is logged into my account. I'm not going to hit refresh here. I'm just going to let this go, but I'm going to give it something really simple. I'm just going to say, hey, give me a quick 3-paragraph history on St. Bernards. So those of you that know me and see my articles, I have a large St. Bernard named Magnus. He's in half my articles. I've got references to him everywhere. So this is going to go off and it will do a quick change. And so several places, the St. Bernard dog breed, I should have said dogs. So it's going to go through and it's actually accessing Sonnet here. You can choose the different models that you want to work from. You can choose Sonnet, Opus 4.8, Opus 5, Fable 5. But the nice part about this is it works directly in Word, where we spend a lot of our time, right? So it's doing some work, it's searching the web, and you can see here it actually created a very, very quick 3 paragraph history on St. Bernard's. I could have had it create an NDA, I could have it create a prenuptial agreement. I could have it create, a contract between 2 software companies. But the nice thing about what this does is you can actually have it do track changes for you. So I'm going to look in here. I'm just going to say, hey, in this document, change the word Bernard to kitty cat. Oh, and use track changes. So I'm going to give it those instructions. So the nice thing is Claude knows how to activate track changes in Microsoft Word. So you can see here, it's planning document edits with track changes. It's going to figure out how it handles all the variations of the word Bernard here. And it will now go through and you'll actually see the track changes on here that it goes through and it'll put my name on it next to the track changes. And the beauty of it, by the way, doing it in Word. So if you were to upload a Word document into Claude, which many people do, or ChatGPT, and say, hey, go make these edits and use track changes, it will do that for you and give you an updated document, but it will say edited by Claude, which you probably don't want to see, right? I'm going to tell it to go ahead and allow these changes here. But when you do it in your own version of Word, it's actually going to show up now. You can see here like Steve Smith deleted Bernard, right? So it'll go through and it will do all these things. It's going to go through really quickly and make all these changes, and it's actually quite fast. So again, normally I would use the Opus model for deeper thinking, but I just wanted to show you that you can do this. It's pretty quick and it makes it work. What I wanted to show you was I actually had a large master vendor manufacturing agreement, right? This is an 18-page agreement. It's got 7,000 words in it. It's absolutely massive. It's designed between hardware companies. And I went through and I asked Claude to go through and completely transform this from, a B2B hardware agreement to basically be a B2C software agreement. And it definitely took a while to do it. But what you'll see here is it actually went through and it completely transformed this document. So when you talk about the ability to identify new clauses, to change things, to make it happen, right? It is absolutely powerful and fantastic. I use Opus 5 to do this, and it probably took 15 or 20 minutes to do because it literally went through clause by clause, piece by piece. And the nice part about it is I can actually decide whether to accept the changes or whether not to accept the changes because of the way we did it here. But it went all the way through, this entire document, all 18 pages. And you can see I basically asked it to change almost every single thing in here, and it has the ability to go do that. So you can work on extremely long documents now, and you can basically have it do anything that you want. And one of the other things that they added it in is in Excel. And so they built and added in Excel. And I know many of the attorneys I work with, work in Excel with settlements and analyzing financials and things like that. And so what I did here is I opened up Claude again. I have to move this speaker thing. It's over here, the button, and there's a ChatGPT one also. So if you use ChatGPT, ChatGPT has an extension here, a plugin for Excel, and they have one for PowerPoint, but they have not released one for Microsoft Word yet. So if you're using Claude, and ChatGPT, if you want to use Microsoft Word, only the Word one, only Claude has one for Word at the moment. I would be surprised if ChatGPT didn't release one soon. But what I did, I actually started with a blank canvas and I said, I want you to go create an incredibly detailed financial document for me that shows a P&L for a 50-person law firm, right? Here's the number of partners, here's the number of associates, here's the number of paralegals and admins, and I want you to create an executive dashboard. So from a single prompt, it actually went through, I said, build an assumptions page, how many partners, or sorry, it's 23 people, how many partners, how many associates and attorneys, how many paralegals, and it made all the things that aren't assumptions formula driven, right? So it created an incredible thing. It built out the revenue for me, right? And all the different things. It built out a detailed income statement, month by month, built out a balance sheet, a statement of cash flows. So it has knowledge of anything that you want to do. And then I said, go create an executive dashboard for me, right? Show me what revenue and EBITDA look like per month, right? What does my monthly ending cash balance look like? And the one thing I will say, because I use all these tools all the time, is that ChatGPT also, as you'll see in a second, built a fantastic model, but the polish you get out of Claude is just higher than ChatGPT. I mean, I hope ChatGPT fixes that, but as you'll see when I switch over the ChatGPT one in a second, it has all the functionality, has all the capabilities, right? I mean, everything as you'll see here, you can see it's formula driven, so it does an amazing job. And if I go look at the ChatGPT one, right, this is the dashboard. So if I compare kind of this dashboard and the graphs to the Claude one, if I go back here, I just happen to think this looks more polished, it looks better. It's more the kind of deliverable I would actually want to send to a client. But that being said, it went out, it built the same kind of assumptions, it built an operating model, it built the financial statements. Both of these tools can do those things and they're great at it. One of the really great use cases, and I've actually done this with a couple of different attorneys, is let's say you get a settlement agreement or a set of financials from someone and you want to go through and figure out if they're accurate. You can load them up into either Claude or into Excel, open up the Claude and the ChatGPT button and say, I need you to go through and validate every assumption, look for any errors, look for things that are hard coded that should be formula driven, and make this thing happen. It is absolutely fantastic at doing that. And I have found more errors and things that people have sent me than you can possibly imagine. So it is absolutely great when you go there. And I would encourage you to do that. It's a absolutely great use case for doing that. Another great thing that Claude has been really good at updating is they are really good at creating artifacts. And if you've not used an artifact is a visualization. So, in ChatGPTs, you'll see in a minute, you can create images, but Claude can create amazing interactive dashboards and visuals that allow you to show data and represent data in really powerful ways. So one of the things I was doing is I was working with a construction litigation firm. And we wanted to show the conditions, on this very detailed contract. We wanted to show the current status of the closing conditions, right? The consents, the diligence risks, the signature status, funds flow dependencies, right? Owner accountability. And when you have hundreds of documents and hundreds of changes, this is a tremendous amount of work. And so one of the reasons I talk about the prompting here is you'll see I use a structure called CORE, C-O-R-E, for context, objectives, um, oh gosh, I'm drawing a complete blank today on the R, role, and then examples, right? So this is a very, very detailed prompt. I asked it to go do a tremendous amount of things here, but you can see I wanted to go through and show all these conditions. I've supplied it a bunch of files. I need, confidential professional responsibility limits. I need interactive artifacts. Here's the objectives. You need to confirm the scope and all the blockers. I need to inventory all the sources. I need to extract a normalized fact set, right? Across hundreds of documents, this is a monumental task. And the output that you get out of this, if I go look at this here, is this is an artifact from Claude. And you can see here, here's the decision, right? So it's telling me, hey, this packet is not closing ready. 3 decisions counsel should focus on first, right? Which instrument is operative, whether May 25 displaced May 18th, and how the 48,500 pair is displayed, right? So it then went item by item through here, what the current status is, what the priority is, what the consequence of not doing this is. And you can see here, here's a whole section on conditions and consents, right? Here's the signature status page of everything that's in here. The merger agreement counterpart. Okay, execution status is complete. Oh, this one's not in the packet. This one's not been started. So you can imagine going through and how long it would take you when you have this level of documents in a very complex case to do all this stuff. So again, this is a great example of this is a very complex visualization. And again, if you would like the prompt, let me know. I'm happy to share it with you. But these tools have gotten so powerful now that they can reason across hundreds of documents, hundreds of objectives, and create powerful tools like this. A second one that I was doing recently is I was working with a family law firm, and we were talking about, again, the power of Claude to visualize things. And I asked them, I said, hey, you're finalizing this divorce settlement, right? And you've got a financial statement you want to share with one of the spouses. How would you show that to them? How would you explain that to them? And, they pulled up a spreadsheet and I said, well, you know what? I bet Claude can actually help us visualize this in a more interesting way. And I said, look, let's make a really simple prompt here. I said, in this case, the example I'm showing you, because it's fictitious, I uploaded a fictitious document here, but I said, I want you to create a beautiful visual artifact that I can share with the client that summarizes the settlement and gives them a few sliders to show how the values can increase over time and how the values will change. And I want them to be able to allow to select and deselect various assets. And so if I go look at this, right, this was, for Avery Bennett, a visualization of her settlement, right? So the net awards to Avery, $8 million. When you look at all the assets, liquid and near liquid, right? Projected value year 10. So we made this, interactive. So she might say, hey, I want to see what happens if it's 7.5%, right? Now I grow up to, $16 million, right? My planning horizon is only 7 years. So what does that mean to me? Do I want to include an annual lifestyle draw and take money out of here? If so, how much, right? So this became a much better way. And as I was working with this firm, they realized this is a great way to be able to show these things. What's the award made of? You can have it do all these things. And again, all this came from a single uploaded spreadsheet. and from the simple prompt I gave. And then we decided to do something fun. We decided to see if we could actually make this, a much more interesting visual. So we said, hey, could we make this much more, like hand drawn, hand cursive? But you can see, the style is different. So you can make it look any way you want. You can have your firm's look and your feel. But again, you can change it and you can still change the interactive sliders and things like that. But using artifacts, and again, they've gotten better and better, and you can actually publish artifacts and share them with other people. Again, a very, very powerful tool. So sort of netted out, the big changes are they released the Fable model, they released the Opus model, which is an absolutely incredible model. I find it incredible for coding and for doing detailed analysis and for research. They introduced a voice model, and then they really introduced, sort of co-work in the cloud. So let's talk about ChatGPT. A lot of you use ChatGPT. I use ChatGPT. It's one of my favorite tools. And again, their big focus area is they really rebuilt ChatGPT around work, not the chat. And so if you use the ChatGPT app in the old app on Windows or on the Mac before, they basically deprecated the old one and they integrated their codecs, their programming app, with their ChatGPT app. And so if I pull this up here now, and again, I showed this earlier, if I do new chat, right, what you see on the top is if I'm in the chat mode, there's chat and there's work. And again, they've designed this to let you go off and do the same kind of things, choose a project, create a directory, use the Microsoft Word plugin, the Excel plugin, the PowerPoint plugin, create content, do whatever you want to do, create scheduled tasks. But their focus now, as you'll see in the example in a minute, on actually having you go do things. I mean, I'll show a simple example again in a second of how you can do document logs and things like that. But just know that their focus is moving off chat into actually doing work. And if I'm going to do a new project here. I will create a new project. I'll call it sample downloads. I'm going to add a folder to it here. I'm going to add my downloads folder just to make things really simple here. And I'm going to go ahead and create this project. And so one of the things I can do, I'm going to switch the model here because I definitely don't need something this big and powerful. Speed is fast. I'm just going to ask it, hey, how many files total are there in the downloads directory and how many image files are there in the downloads directory? Right? So one of the things about work, and Claude can do the same thing, is it can actually take action, on directories and do things. So you can see, I'm going to count the files in the downloads directory, then I'm going to identify images by their extensions. So you can see how fast this was, right? In the main directory, there were 582 files, including 200 images, including all subfolders. There are 2,700 files and 360 images, right? So it goes through and it does things really, really fast, right? So it really is powerful. I could have it change things. I could have it do things. I could have it move all those files to a different directory. If they were legal documents, I could have it analyze those as seen in the example, but it really lets you do other things really, really powerfully. And so one of the things that they've done is they're really focused on skills and really driving those things. So they've added a ton of new sources. So you can connect your sources, you can connect your knowledge bases, you can connect Dropbox. If you use Box or Google Drive, you can add those things. You can create automated skills in all these things. But the biggest thing for them is the ability to create these agents. Like I showed you that agent earlier to run on a schedule. But what I could do, I could literally say in this task here, if I go back in my tasks. Let's see, I'm back in here. Oh, I'm going to go back in here. I could say, hey, I want to turn this into a scheduled task. I'd like this to run once a week, every Friday at 3 p.m., where you count the number of files and give me an update and then give me the delta change from the prior run. So turn that into a scheduled task for me. And then, by the way, I want you to turn that into a skill that I can call anytime, call it check my files. Right? So I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through skills, but skills are incredibly useful. It allows you to basically, have routine things that you do again and again, like the way you process the document, the way you write, the way you do things. But it's going to go through here now. It's going to create a scheduled task. Then it's going to create a new skill, reusable, called check my files, that I can then call at any time as we go forward. But like I said, the big shift here is from simply chatting to working and doing things. And again, I'm going to show you an example in a second. This might be my favorite new function. So voice has become a control service in ChatGPT, not just a dictaphone. So it is a full duplex tool now. It listens while it speaks. You can fire off other things. I'll show you some examples. It drives work in codecs agents, either from the phone or from the web interface. Oh, sorry, it's desktop only at the moment. I forgot. They haven't put it on the phone yet. But you can launch different agents. You can do things. Whereas Claude is really just sort of an interactive, kind of discussion back and forth. ChatGPT's voice mode lets you go do things. So let me show you here. And one of the things that's great is, I gotta move the video here. They've actually introduced browsers. So there's a built-in browser here. So I can say, hey, go to my Intelligence by Intent website, go to CNBC, and you can interact when you're chatting with an open browser here. And they've introduced computer use. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to basically fire off this mode here. I'm just going to go to the voice mode. Hey, chat, can you look at my open browser tabs and tell me what's open right now at the moment for the in-app browser?
Checking.
I don't know if I turned on sound when I was sharing. Actually, let me stop share for a second. Hold on. I want to make sure that I'm sharing audio as well. I'm not sure. Oh, I did not. So there, I'm now resharing this with audio so you can hear it because it basically said checking. Yeah, chat, you got it. You're okay. So just give me the browser tabs. And by the way, in the background, go tell me how many new emails I got in the last 24 hours that are unread. And then fire off another process to, by the way, go look and open up the application clearly on my Mac. And then create a new document in there based on the Google Docs file that's in Chrome. And then I want you to go spin off another agent and go do some research for me around the latest offerings from the Beverly Hills Bar Association, and then send me an email about that. So
On it.
yep, I don't know if you heard on it. Let me pause it here. Hold on. Let me go over here. And here is it's down here. I'm just gonna
The
pause it. You can
in-app
sort of,
browser is still empty, so there are no tabs open there.
you can see
I
that
do
the
see
chat is
12
over here.
unread emails from the last day.
Oh,
I'm still
unread
working on
emails.
the document and research pieces.
Yeah. So one of the things that's nice, I muted the thing here, is I can open up something else. Like if I open this up, hey
I'm
chat,
looking
what
at
screen are you
the
seeing right now? Are you seeing the my Excel, or are you seeing my document that's the BHBA Summer AI Update? What do you have visibility to on the screen?
checking that now. I'm looking at your screen now to distinguish which one is open. I see Google Slides with
Yep.
the BHBA Summer AI
Yep.
Update deck on the opening slides.
So I'm going to stop this. But one of the things, I mean, I could spend an entire hour giving you guys demos of what this tool can do, but it will go off and it will open up browsers. It will connect to email. You can control things on your computer. I can actually have it open up Excel, create a brand new sheet, populate data, copy things from one to another. It really opens up a tremendous amount of use cases for the way that you use these tools. And their voice mode, like I said, it's actually much better than the Claude one. It lets you just talk to it, interact, and you can keep going as it's doing things and fire off new processes. So it really, for me, what I do, it has absolutely changed the game in the way that I work. So something else that Claude is fantastic at, it is amazing at image generation. You can create, detailed settlement. Let me make this a little bit bigger just so you can see these images a little bit better. You can create, detailed settlement documents. You can create descriptions of how business entities are tied together. I use it for image generation for a lot of the articles I write and things like that. But the image generation tool in ChatGPT is absolutely incredibly powerful, and I would encourage you to use it if you need it for different things. So let me show you kind of work in process and how this goes. So one of the things, and I do work with a lot of family law firms, but you can get examples across almost any type of firm. When they get a new matter or a new client in, they'll often get a ton of financial documents in, right? And they need to understand what's in those documents. So they need to open those up. They need to OCR them if they haven't been OCR'd. They need to put Bates numbers on them. They need to copy them into a new directory. They want to update a document log. And so ChatGPT work or Claude Cowork can actually now go do this automatically. And so I have a sample prompt in here. And what you'll see here, it says, hey, you're helping a family law paralegal build a document log from a financial disclosure production. I've attached two things, the sample document log spreadsheet, a set of produced documents, bank statements, brokerage, retirement accounts, things like that. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to go create a new subdirectory called output, right? I want you to create a new file called the new output. I want you to then go into the PDF, analyze it carefully, break it apart because there's multiple PDFs in here. I didn't put the OCR instruction in this particular sample, but you can do that as well. You can have it OCR things. Then I want you to go through and actually put Bates numbers on it and then update the document log when you're all done. So I actually ran this earlier today in Cowork here. And if I go up into my pinned stuff, the financial disclosure document log here, let me just make this smaller here. I mean, I dumped this prompt in, as you'll see here. It went through and it broke out, it says, hey, here's your new output. Here's the new spreadsheet that I've created for you. And it's opened here in the browser, but it actually put it in the file, right? But it actually has all the information, that I asked for in all the different spreadsheet. And then it went through and it created, every different document, right? Every PDF, it broke it apart. It put the Bates numbers on it, right? You can see here, here's the grant deed. Here's, SMS 002, here's SMS 003, SMS 004. And if I were to open up the use cases over here, if I look at, this is where it was in document log over here, it actually created this whole set of outputs. So it took that one PDF, it broke all these things up, it created this new output spreadsheet for me. It really is a powerful tool. And that's why I talk about it actually doing work for you. So you can point it at entire directories, you can have it go do really, really powerful and incredible things. And it's a terrific use case in terms of the way to use these tools. I'm going to show you one more example here, an exhibit builder. This is actually one that I actually happened to do in Claude, although I could have done it in ChatGPT also. But there's a great way to use these tools to do exhibits. And again, this is another good visualization for, for artifacts. But again, you could actually have ChatGPT do the exact same thing. It will build out the same file. And what I'd asked it to do is I said, hey, I want to demonstrate a very complex Gantt chart or a process for this to go through, right? I want this to be a demonstrative exhibit. I want to have it as an HTML file that I can send around and send clients. So again, here's the full context. I'm helping this construction litigation firm. Here's a whole bunch of facts about this case. Here's my objectives, right? I want a self-contained interactive HTML file that's, done in Gantt style, critical, delay timelines and things like that. You can see all the things that are in here. And again, very, very detailed prompts. 6 months ago, you could not have done a prompt like this. These tools couldn't have followed it, but now they can. They are so powerful in terms of doing that. And what you get out of this, if I go find the Meridian Tower here, is, and again, I could have done this in ChatGPT or Claude, but you can actually create a very, very powerful Gantt chart here that, is interactive. I can drag things, I can move things around. But again, it really lets you visualize this data and do things that were challenging to do in the past. So you can build amazing things. One thing that's not in the presentation I want to highlight is I was working with a client recently, and we had to analyze thousands and thousands and thousands of documents, right? There was north of 50,000 documents, and we were getting ready for a deposition. We wanted to be able to ask questions about, hey, if we go depose this person, has something been asked there, right? So I used ChatGPT to start, from a basis of 50,000 documents to get it down to, the 5,000 pages that matter in the real world one. In this particular example, there are 400 documents here and 1,200 pages. But what it allows them to do, they can go in, I'm going to just type the word Thanksgiving here. And in their real world one, that we built it for a sub 1 second response, but it goes through and identifies all the documents, all the 400 documents here where Thanksgiving is referenced. It pulls up, all the passages here, right? And then it pulls up the actual document and they highlight it. So if they're sitting in a meeting or they're in a deposition and they're positive that something was asked and answered maybe a year or two ago, right? We can point this at the entire corpus of data and it would instantly find that document, highlight those phrases for them. So you can see here, it found every document, holiday parenting proposal, holiday parenting email chain, right? Another one in the email chain, December holiday rotation plan. So everything that it found Thanksgiving or the word holiday, because it really uses semantic search, it pulls all these things up. So these are the kind of tools you can actually build now and deploy really, really easily across clients and organizations. So let me talk about Gemini for a minute. I want to make sure there's time for Q&A at the end because I love the questions and what we're doing. So as I said, Google has not launched their new 3.5 Pro model. They did launch an updated 3.5 Flash model. The big change they made was to, if you've used a tool called Notebook LM, they now call it Gemini Notebook on July 16th. It's still standalone, but they updated the model in there, which is fantastic. It's much faster. It's much more powerful. There's a lot more use cases in it. So I'm going to show you an actual matter from a notebook that I have here. And it's a funny one. It's a fictitious one. But the advantage of using these tools is you can actually upload hundreds of documents. In fact, if you've got the paid version, you can upload, it's either 500 or 600 documents. So I did a funny one. I like dogs. And so I uploaded in here 300 depositions of different dogs, right? So depositions of, in this case, here's the dachshund Abby and what the information is, right? So my name is Abby. I'm a dachshund. I have lived with the Wilson family for 8 wonderful years. So Notebook LM lets you put sources in, and then you can ask questions about it. So I can ask something like, how many documents contain golden retrievers? right? And the nice thing about what's now Gemini Notebook, what used to be called Notebook LM, is it will only look in the sources you provided. It's not going to go search the web. It's not going to look at anything else it's been trained on. It's only going to go work on this. So if you've got a corpus of documents that's under about 500 documents, you can upload that into a single, notebook and then go ask questions. You can also do all sorts of other things. So while that's going off and thinking, by the way, if you see the text here, right, you'll see it looks like it's speaking German. I actually asked it to speak back to me as if it was a German dog trainer to be funny. So I was asking questions about, what do you know about Magnus? It's like, hey, I don't know anything about Magnus. There's no dog named Magnus in here, right? I asked it to be kind of snarky and kind of funny. You can make it do anything you want there. But what I want to show you is you can actually have it go create, a detailed roster of everything that's in there. You can do all sorts of great analysis. You can have it create presentations. If I go open this up here, it created an entire presentation, about the content that's in here, right? You can have it go do it. You can edit these presentations. You can have it create diagrams and videos and all sorts of things. So this was one of their big changes. They continue to add to it. It is an absolutely fantastic tool. So you see here, it got back to the question about golden retrievers. It says there's 9 of these. And the nice part is what you'll see here is the golden retriever training files. It'll actually have a citation here. So when you're searching for a document that you've been working on, it will actually then allow you to go, it'll show you exactly where it pulled that information when you ask a question. And then if you click on it, it'll actually pull up the original source document. So while we still wait for them to update the models, that's a big change. The other thing that they released, and this is unfortunately only available in their consumer tools, and I typically tell clients, please don't use the consumer tools that translate your data, but they've introduced something called Spark. And Spark is their agentic tool where you can actually have it go connect to all your different data sources. You can have it go do different things. You can have it declutter your inbox. You can have it search for the things. I've had it search for very complex travel things. So I use it on a personal basis. I'm waiting for them to roll it out in the Google Workspace, the business edition. They have not done that yet, but know that they are very, very focused on agents, just like Claude Cowork and ChatGPT work. So I would say coming soon, watch for it. It's really, really good. So before we get to some Q&A, what I tell people is, look, pick the workflow first, right? When you're thinking about doing something, understand what does your workflow look like today. So one of the clients that I've worked with, I actually had one of the paralegals go through and videotape the screen to understand, okay, when they get in new documents, right? Whether they get them in through email or through the court or through a Dropbox link, how do they look at those? How do they process those? What decisions do they make, right? So we started to look at what does the end-to-end output look like and what does the process look like so we can actually start to automate those. And we picked one and we built these incredibly complex skills so that now we can save, paralegals and admins and attorneys tons and tons of time to go through and to use these tools and to do really different things, right? So pick something first, focus on it. And I would say, pick what you're doing, write it out, have a partner sign off that, yep, this is what we want to test. And this is exactly what we did. We want to build skills to do this because we want to automate this process, right? And then we run it supervised. We run the existing process to make sure that the AI is doing it right. We run the manual process, we run the AI process kind of side by side. And we look at then how much time saved, how much rework do we have to do, right? And what we found again and again is that the time savings when you start using Claude Cowork or ChatGPT work drives huge increases in productivity, huge increases in quality, and it really allows us to save things and do things in ways that we couldn't before. And then we take the first process, then we start scaling it, fixing it, or if it didn't work, we kill it, right? And we go on to the next one. But I am a big believer that, look, ROI is incredibly important. We want to focus on these things. We want to make this stuff happen. We want it to go do all these things. So a couple of things I say in every presentation, and this is really important because I know there's still a lot of concern about security and where we're going. And these models are getting better and better. Look, there is still risk, right? One of the original cases, Mata versus Avianca, was not the last case that's getting sanctioned. I write about sanctions on my blog. You can see what the latest stats are. I follow the guy there's a French attorney that tracks all the different things. There are real attorneys that get sanctioned. So know that at the end of the day, you have to verify everything that goes out. Before you say anything to a judge, before you send it to the opposing counsel, before you send it to a client, make sure the tool is not hallucinating. I will say that especially Claude Opus 5 is much, much better now at not hallucinating, and it will tell you when it doesn't know something, right? Avoidance is not safety. I mean, every attorney I know is now using these AI tools. Your clients are expecting it. They're saying, hey, Why aren't you getting time savings out of this? What tools you're using. And then if you need help with governance, reach out to me. I can help you with doing that thing, right? The bar is moving. The technology competence is now part of the duty of competence, right? The standard is no longer whether you can use AI, it's whether you use it well, right? So learning how to use it well, learning how to do these things is really, really important. I tell people, look, there are 4 rules that I think are super important for using AI in practice. The first thing, and if you've seen me present before, is incredibly important. Only use the commercial tools, right? Use the team or enterprise version of Claude, use the business or enterprise version of ChatGPT. They have made it, both Claude now and ChatGPT have made it very inexpensive to use their business version, which has all the commercial controls, all the privacy, all the no training on your data. You can start with as little as 2 licenses per month. I think it's $25 a month per seat. So effectively for $50 a month, you can use a commercial tool now, either from ChatGPT or Claude, and have access to all these advanced capabilities, right? Please do that. Do not use a consumer one, even if you turn training off, right? There are too many risks, and you really risk, waiving, your work product rights and things like that. So please use the commercial ones. Again, match the right tool to the right surface, right? Use Cowork to go drive and do things. Use it to create code. Use these, these Excel add-ins and the Word add-ins. They are fantastic. You can use it with your commercial subscription so that anything you do there is not being trained on. This one is really important, and I tell everybody this. You should treat every client sort of into their own project. So when you go into Claude, and actually I'll just do this real time here, right? So if I were to go into Claude, and if I had a new client, I would actually create a new project for this client, right? Because I want all the matter, all the content about this client in one place. And I do the same thing in ChatGPT. Because these tools have memory, right? When you design a project properly, right, the memory stays in there. It doesn't bleed out into other things. And actually, that's a really important point. So the default is I'm going to call this client X, and I'm going to just go ahead and say create a project. So if I'm in Claude and I create a project here, everything in here, every chat I have, everything I upload is only going to be in this project. So if I have another project called client Y, it's not going to go there. Nothing I talk about here could go there. If I just do general chats, there's a risk that you might have said something about client X. And if you're having a different chat about client Y in general chats outside of projects, there's a risk that these AI tools, if you've turned on memory, might understand and think about, oh, hey, yeah, we already talked about this, right? I'm going to bring this over here. So please use projects for each of your different clients and each of your matters. Something really important in ChatGPT, and I just want to highlight this. If I go create a new project here, I'm going to call this client X. This is super important. I'm going to say default memory. No, see the drop down here? Use project only memory. By default, if you create a project, in ChatGPT, it will not only have memories of things that are in that project, it'll have memories of things that are outside that project also. So you want to make sure, in order to make sure that things for this client and this matter are only here, make sure you have project only memory and then create that project. So super, super important. And then intent, right? I talk about prompting with intent. I've got these detailed prompts, context, objective, role, examples, do all that stuff. So let me end with my 5-second commercial here. Look, if you need help, I'd love to help you. I've worked with, over 3,000 attorneys at this point across training, 1,000 different firms. I do detailed executive workshops across all these tools, and I'm not paid to sell any of these. I have no allegiance to any of them. I try to help people pick the best tool for them. I do training and ongoing education. I've helped organizations develop their AI governance and usage policies. And for select firms, I'll do AI case support. If you've got a very complex case and you're trying to do really advanced AI work, reach out to me. As Mark said when he started, I run a large Substack. It's got about 2,000 subscribers now. It's at smithsteven.com. It's right here. I publish articles almost every day. There'll be a new one out here tonight. But go take a look at it. It's completely free. It will always be free. And my email is here. My phone number is here. I'm happy to reach out and help. And just the last point I want to make is, as I said earlier, you've got to verify everything that comes out of AI, right? AI doesn't have a bar number. You do. So please, pick the workflow. Your name goes in the work. Verify it that it's accurate. Make sure that it's true. So I know we've covered a ton of stuff. I'm going to stop sharing. First, I want to say thank you for the time. And I'm going to go in and I'll ask and see if there are any questions in the chat here. So I can open up the Q&A now and let me start going through some of these. So can I recommend CoConsole? So I don't actually work with CoConsole, so I can't recommend or not recommend. It's not one that I work with on a regular basis. I really focus on the general tools, the ChatGPTs, the Claudes, the Geminis of the world. I know a lot of people have used it, and I've honestly heard a lot of mixed reactions. How to avoid AI hallucinations. And so AI hallucinations, so like I said, use the more advanced models. And by the way, turn on the most advanced reasoning. So when you select, actually, I'll share my screen for one more second here because this is actually another really important point. If I go back into Claude here, let me just move this Q&A out of the way so I can see here. If I go into Claude, one of the things you can do when you pick your model, so I'm on Opus 5, and then they have effort level, right? Low, medium, high, extra, and max. The more, first of all, the more advanced you choose the model, right? Or the higher level of effort you put in, the more thinking it does, the less likely it is to make a hallucination. But it also takes longer to answer and it takes more of your subscription, more of your tokens. So I typically start for basic tasks at, it's sort of like low and medium. But when I'm doing final presentations, I basically switch over to high because it's great. I've also built a detailed fact checker. I didn't share it on the screen, but I have a detailed fact checker that I run things through at the end that will actually go search the web, search every document uploaded, and look at every single thing and compare all the facts, all the assertions. And so if you want a copy of that, email me, I'll email it to you and you can add it as a skill. It's really easy to do. How can a lawyer or using Claude or ChatGPT avoid having his or her name on AI chats and use becoming discoverable in event of litigation? So again, if you're using the commercial ones, it's not training on your data, right? So it's, that's your stuff. It's not out there shared publicly. It's really not discoverable. I mean, they make it very difficult to get to that stuff. And that's again, why I talk about using the commercial ones. If you go back in my Substack and search on the, search for $200. I wrote an article a couple months ago about the latest privacy policies and all these things. And it talks about, how to make sure that you're using these tools safely and confidently. What level of Claude subscription is necessary, desired? So again, you need to have a commercial one. So they have consumer ones, and the consumer ones are basically called Pro and they're called Max. And again, even though you can technically turn off training, I advise all my clients, please don't do that, right? Then they have commercial ones, right? And they're ones for Claude, they're called Team or Enterprise. So subscribe to that. The minimum is basically $50 a month for Claude, and it's about $50 a month for ChatGPT. ChatGPT's entry-level one is called Business. You can find them on the website. They're easy to do. For solos and small firms that don't have access to closed enterprise models, how do we avoid violating client confidentiality? Oh, again, the same thing. Use the commercial ones, right? Look, the Bar Association said if you've done your due diligence and you're using tools that have the security and privacy, you can put things in there. Now, a lot of my clients still want to sanitize the documents. They want to take things out, and you can do that. In fact, you can write tools that actually do that as well. But you can actually, so you can sanitize it before you put it in there if you're worried about that. But the tools, because they're not training and they're contractually obligated not to, and I can send you their data processing agreements and everything else. I look at this stuff all the time because this stuff's really important. Does Microsoft 365 Copilot have the ability to schedule tasks? Yes, they have added that into Copilot 365. You have to subscribe to it. That's the extra fee. And that's the extra subscription fee. And there are now extra fees for Microsoft to run it. So check the pricing on that. They actually charge when your agents run additional fee, whereas today, ChatGPT and Claude don't do that. I love ChatGPT and Claude, but last I checked, only Gemini has had a relative inexpensive version that maintains sufficient confidentiality for legal work. So I use Notebook LM. Has anything changed so that Claude or Chat? Yeah, so I just talked about this. Look, you can go read the Substack article I wrote about, search for $200. But so if you're using the commercial ones, it has the exact same kind of confidentiality and privacy that that Gemini has. And again, if you're using the Gemini consumer version, you do not have that same level of confidentiality. Please, please, please only use like Gemini Workspace. And if you're using Notebook LM, make sure you're using the Workspace version of that because there's a consumer one and there's ways that data can be trained on if you're not careful. Are any of these connected yet to legal databases for reliable legal research? So if you go look at what Claude introduced in their legal release back in, I think it was May with the 20 connectors, right? They're adding more and more stuff to it. The firms are, Thomson Reuters and all the and Westlaw and stuff, they are limiting what can be done there, but they are slowly adding different things into there. And there are other public sources out there you can connect Claude to or ChatGPT to, where you can actually get very good legal research. So it's slowly changing over time, but the incumbents are trying to lock down to make sure you have a subscription and do things like that. Do all the Office plugins utilize the same privacy data structure as your business enterprise account? Yes, great question. As long as you are logged into like your Claude version on your commercial account and you're using Word or Excel with that account or ChatGPT, the same thing, it inherits the exact same data privacy stuff so you can use it exactly the same way. I'm so glad you asked that question. That was a great question. Do you need to first have a Claude annual subscription before you can use Claude in Word, or is it paid limited? No, you can do monthly. So you can do a commercial monthly subscription to either Claude or ChatGPT, and as part of that, you can access the downloads as well. So definitely start monthly, figure out which tool you like, and go from there. Malware bytes reported that Claude chat's driven Google search. Yeah, look, this is a super misleading headline. Okay, people had to physically go into a chat, they had to share it, they had to make a public link available, and then someone had to actually share that on a website that Google was indexing. Your searches, your artifacts, they are not Googleable by default. I mean, I've written about this in the past. There's an article about this too. It's a completely misleading headline, that your chats are showing up there. Again, you had to go in, you had to physically share it. You had to say, this is available to anyone on the planet with this link. And then someone had to post that link on a website that Google was indexing, right? Nothing of that you're doing in this, as long as you haven't shared it publicly, is going to show up by default. How can we integrate AI into our case manager systems? Oh, so if you go look what Google's doing, so that a lot of these companies, Clio's doing this too, they're adding something called MCP servers, these connectors that you can actually start integrating and connecting documents and getting them out and doing things like that. So I didn't cover that in here, but there's a lot of updates happening in there to start making this integration more seamless and easier to do. There's a bunch more questions. Let me just scroll and see if there's anything that's sort of really new here, because I know we're past time and I need to wrap up. This is a good question. Does Claude permit you to have an agent log into your Westlaw account or perform legal research to develop case summaries? So look, Claude or ChatGPT can actually control a Chrome browser and can log in and can do things. However, Westlaw and others have basically sort of in their terms and conditions have said they don't want agents automatically connecting in. So you have to go check the terms of service very carefully about whatever legal research tool you're using. These tools can technically do it. Look, Claude and ChatGPT can log into all my paid accounts. It can actually navigate things. It can do research for me. It can pull things down. It can actually do downloads. It can get files. But you got to check the terms of service of what you're accessing. So just be careful around that stuff. So someone asked about a great webinar. Thank you. I appreciate the comment. Again, Westlaw, LexisNexis, I don't natively compare those. So I try to be very careful about that stuff. So I don't generally cover those. I try to, leave that to other people that are in the space. How did you add your chats for Gemini? Can you upload chats from GPT and Claude easily? I'm not sure I understand the question from Jay. So if you send me a follow-up email, I'll try and answer that question. I'm just not exactly sure what that meant here. And I'm going to skip the thing about autonomous weapons and things like that. And transcripts, the potential problem with analysis and research is that any requirement to first load all documents and transcripts for analysis and research, or are you saying you can do a search of your entire hard drive? Oh, so great question. I'll end with this one. So there is a limit if you're doing a chat as to how many files you can upload and how much each one of these chats can handle, right? So it can actually manage, I think you can upload, depending on the tool and the day, 15 or 20 documents in a given chat, and that's sort of all I can look at. When you're using a tool like Claude Cowork or you're using ChatGPT Work, you can actually point it in a directory, and even if it has 50, 100, 1,000 files, you can tell it to start going and opening up those files one by one and looking for things, and then creating an index and finding those things. So that's like the document log use case I did. I mean, when I showed you that example of the deposition search, we started with 50,000 documents and we created indexes, so we knew which documents to go grab. Then we grabbed those and we put them in a special search. So that's the power of these tools. It allows you to do things that you cannot do in a regular chat. And that's the power of work and what you're doing here. So look, I will try to get some of the other questions. I'll answer them by email if I can get copies of these from Suzanne and the team. Again, I want to thank you for the time. There are so many great things going on. These tools have gotten so good. And if you got questions, reach out. And if you're looking for assistance, again, please reach out to me. But thank you again. I really appreciate it. And look, happy using these tools. These tools are amazing and they get better and better every day. So I love talking about it and using them, and hopefully you can tell from that. So again, thanks everybody and have a great rest of your day.